Hey everybody, I'm Cornboy here in the flesh today doing something a little different, and I'm talking about Noisevember. Noisevember was a challenge I did this past November where I created one sound effect every day for the whole month. This challenge wasn't an original of mine. It was created by the site Airwiggles, who is owned by Greg Lester and Lewis Thompson. It's a fairly new social platform, I guess you could call it, for sound designers. It's a great place. They have little meetups. They talk with industry professionals in a lot of times the game industry, but also other forms of audio. And they did this challenge. And they had some great prompts and everything. So it was fun to take part in, and I wanted to show off all of my entries for it. I did one entry every day. I made it through the whole month and completed it. And so we're just going to take a look, take a bit of a casual but thorough deep dive into all of the sounds I made. Hopefully you'll be able to learn something about creating your own sounds throughout the course of this video. I don't know how educational it'll be exactly, but it should be some mix of educational, informative, and entertaining in there. Month-long do one creative thing a day challenges are pretty fun, and they teach you a lot about yourself and your creative process that you wouldn't learn otherwise. Like, for example, just doing this, I learned that FL Studio actually does have a video player, which I thought it didn't for a long time. I could have checked easily, but it's just something you run into like that. And I learned some other cool sound design tricks of like, oh, okay, if I ever need to make this type of sound, I can come back and do this thing. And even though, the results you get aren't going to be like top tier stuff because, you're only giving yourself one day to make everything, you end up with some really cool things. And so Noisevember was awesome. I'm looking forward to going through this stuff. I also, at the risk of creating a new corporate buzzword, got to do some micro networking with some really cool people who did some really cool sound design. So anyway, we're going to jump into it and start with day one. So day one of the challenge was Roar, and I'll just go ahead and play what I did here. So this is a ground-up redesign of the Thunderjaws roar from Horizon Zero Dawn, which I said that I made there. So again, it's 4 synth layers and 1 layer of my own edited voice, and I'll go through that now so you can see what that actually looks like. So here is the little FL Studio project file I did for this, and as you can hear, might be a little loud. Nope, all good. So yeah, let's pull this apart a little bit. So we've got these 4 synth layers doing their own thing. That main impact layer here is pretty much 2 brass VSTs. And they're both run through a bunch of distortion and other effects here. So that's what they sound like without the distortion. And that's with everything else on it. Isotope Trash 2 was a super helpful plugin for this month. It really transforms sounds. It's a great distortion, partial LFO. It does filtering. It does a lot of good stuff, and it transforms sounds really well. So then we have this layer here, which was kind of this build-up form, and this was just something I made out of an FM synthesizer using Citrus within FL, doing a technique that I normally do for bass music drops, like dubstep growls and that kind of thing. This is still going off of this one patch design for Citrus that I saw Seamless R make in a video like 6 years ago at this point. So it's an old reliable design, just basically with using these 3 main ones, and then this guy is just adding a little bit of flavor on top. Frequency modulation is a lot to get into right now, so I'll skip over that. But if you want to look at it more, you can pause the video there and check out that patch for Citrus. And so we have this layer here. And that sound I'm super proud of because that was made totally synthetically. I didn't use any samples for that. I know it sounds like a lawnmower, which ended up being really cool. It basically takes this patch here and it runs it through Isotope Trash. So without Trash, it's just kind of a piddly little hitting sound just based off a preset from Flex, and then you turn that on. And it really compresses the heck out of it and crunches it up. And then we get to this part, which is one of my favorites. This is a layer of my own voice here. And you can hear it a little bit in there. Some of the human vocalizations come through. And if I turn off all of this stuff, that is just me like catching my own voice in my throat, like going in the back there, and then processing that, and then putting it pretty down in the mix just adds a little bit of a layer of realistic organic sound into this like mechanical beast growl thing. So that one worked out. I just made a fool of myself in front of the mic for a little bit, and that sound worked out. And then the other layers we have in here, this guy's muted, so I'm not actually using that one. This is the final layer down here, and it's another synth layer. And so the idea behind that noise was just to get like the power source for the Thunderjaw. And so the thought was, okay, it'll probably have some sort of futuristic nuclear fusion or something motor going in it. So I'll try to create something that just sounds like electricity as a quieter layer in there that adds some padding, adds a bit of, frequency range, frequency saturation in there. And altogether, works out pretty well. Yeah. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to day 2. Day 2 is a little more self-explanatory. I made this whole video for it during the challenge, so I'll just play this now. Yeah, so that one, I decided to try to make a chain sound convincingly with just one hand. Thankfully, both my hands are good now. I had a pretty badly sprained wrist at the beginning of the month, but here mid-December, doing great. So this one, pretty self-explanatory. I don't need to dig into the project for that. I just took keys, that one recording of it, and was able to beef them up, make it sound quite a bit bigger. Day 3 is Shine, and this one I made a little text prompt for. It was just something I thought up of right as I posted it. It wasn't like a huge overarching, theme, I have this whole world design thing. You can read it here yourself if you'd like. And here is what the actual sound is. So yeah, this one's a bit more musical in nature. It is 8-bit themed, and it is pretty self-explanatory. I went for a fairly Zelda-inspired thing here, despite never playing any of the older Zelda games. But you get the picture. I thought of a big inspiration for when I thought of this was the level in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, the Crystal Cavern level, where you go in and you touch this giant crystal gem on the wall, and then a flood happens and it washes you out of the dungeon. And that was just one inspiration. It was kind of the visual I had in my mind when I was making this thing. I wanted to go for a little bit ethereal, a little strange, but end on a friendly note. So let me pull up the actual music for this. Here we can see the actual notes for everything. So there's a little chord pad going on behind everything, just doing a fully diminished chord, which is nice and crunchy. And then these arpeggios above it are doing augmented chords. So they clash very nicely. There's a lot of dissonance in there, minor seconds and minor thirds just stacked up on top of each other. And of course, augmented chords are major thirds. And they just slowly get dragged out over time. And it resolves from this G fully diminished sound, that D sharp, starting on that D sharp arpeggio, into just a, well, it goes actually into another augmented chord here. But it's not, it doesn't continue augmented. It is augmented with a major seventh on it, and then it's got an add 9, and then that third back on top. So I think you'd call it a sharp 5. I think it's just a sharp 5 chord. And so it's still a little ethereal, but at least compared to that fully diminished, it sounds friendlier, I guess is a good way to put it. And then these little arpeggios going in the background are a B major chord and then that G augmented. So just the B on, treating the B on top as a separate chord, and then that G descending. Day 4, the theme was Submerge. And for this one, I decided to go with a clip from Man at Arms Reforged, a show on YouTube I used to watch all the time. Of a sword just being quenched. And actually, that's not a true quenching. That is someone quenching the sword in oil. So it does not sound like that. This is like a fully fictionalized sound, as if it was in water instead. I just wanted to get that steam effect in there, but that's not actually what it would sound like at all. And the interesting thing about this one, I explained it a little bit here in a reply to someone. It was all made with white noise. So that main fizzing sound is a layer of white noise, and then the flame licks are actually just a very quickly, rapidly automated EQ on white noise, making the sound of like flames licking, I guess you'd call it. Day 5, I went with a pretty quick one for this day. It was heat, so I went with Magmar using Fire Blast. And this one was entirely my own voice. I just ran it through VST and added a layer of white noise just for a little bit of crunch. And so here's the original voice clip. What I did raw onto the microphone, I started a bit further away and then got in closer to activate the proximity effect so that you got that low end on, like, as the fire propagates out, it would get lower because it's larger. That was the thought there. So here's me again, and then I'll play the actual full sound. And then with some distortion, it came out nicely. For day 6, I went with one of my favorite games, Old School RuneScape, and I went with the Ice Barrage spell. And so I wanted to try to do an as faithful as I could recreation of the sound. So here is, I'm going to lower my volume real quick because these sounds are loud. This is the official games version. And then here's my copycat version. And let me open up the project for these guys. So to make this one, I dragged the original sound effect in and just basically built up everything over it. This one was tricky, but what helped is that I know how the RuneScape sounds work because they all function off of just basic tone generators. So sine waves, white noise, triangle wave, saw wave, pulse waves, that's all they can do. So I knew my only starting points, and I just had to figure out how they pushed those sounds to actually get there. And so this is a bunch of different layers for this pretty quick sound. So we have these kind of starting layers here. And then that ping is augmented with this synth. And then this bloop, I think, is this part comes in later. Actually, that's the crash effect. So that's just filtered white noise with a bunch of reverb on it. And it's run through a like bit crusher, so it gets totally crushed to death there. And then we also have these little descending arpeggios. Oh yeah, and I kept it as the same chord and then changed the pitch of those with automation instead, which I believe is what they did in the original, but I couldn't quite nail exactly what those pitches were. And then we have this guy here helping this ding as just a little bit more attack there to make it nice and sharp. And the other interesting thing I can say about this is in the original sound, that lower sweep, as I was trying to make this top layer, I think what actually happened is it's not actually two separate synths. It's not one going down and then that lower one going up like I decided to do, but I think it's actually the Nyquist principle happening there. So basically, the sine wave goes up beyond the sampling rate that the RuneScape engine is able to produce, and so those frequencies start getting sampled incorrectly, and you get these artifacts of a different tone that the sampler thinks it should be doing, causes it to come up from the bottom. It's very technical. It has to do with bitrate. If you look up Nyquist theory and like ghost frequencies, you can figure that stuff out and get a more technical explanation if you want. But if we listen to this, you can hear it kind of pop up here, because I had this whole thing low cut so you wouldn't hear it, but you saw it come up there a little bit. You hear that bop bop whap. That's not in the MIDI at all. That just showed up because it went over what the computer is able to produce, at least for this bit rate. So anyway, that's that one. Let's move on to the next day, day 7. This day was pretty cool. I will let this video play for itself. Yeah, so this one I'm very proud of. I just grabbed orange things because the theme of the day was orange, and it ended up being pretty cool. I didn't use any synthesizers or anything for this one. I just used these sounds, altering them with a lot of distortion, pitch shifting, slowing things down and stuff like that. And I have this little video here to go over how I did that already. So again, Isotope Trash is the real MVP of this one, really adding a lot of beef to those sounds, layering them up, adding those LFO effects, and making everything sound much larger and mechanical, more mechanical than it was. For day 8, mechanical. I had a few of these days where I did the prompt and then I didn't look ahead at what the next one would be, and then it basically fit perfectly with whatever the next day was. This was the first day where I didn't have like a full amount of time to work on it, so I did something pretty quick where I just fooled around with the synthesizer and got this sound. And so there's no visual for that or anything. I just went purely conceptual. And some people had some cool ideas for what they thought it was. I really like the idea of like a massive warehouse-sized nickel. That one's pretty fun. And yeah, pretty straightforward. Just worked with the synth on that one. No need to show the project. And then it sounds like a Portal. Next day was Portal. So this one here is a scene from Amphibia that I redid all the sound for. So everything's original from the ground up. Cool, let's go ahead and open up the project file for this guy. This one is a lot of layers, for sure. Most of them are synths, and there's a ton of automation going behind this thing that basically just ramps up energy as you approach the portal widening within the video. So this is all one synth here. You can hear a little bit. It has a bit of a respace effect on it. So it's frequency modulation, and the pitches are just rubbing against each other a little bit. They're not exactly set up to be like cohesive. And the subtle difference in frequencies between the pitches here means that the sound oscillates faster at higher pitches than at lower pitches. And that shows very differently in depending on which pitch you go through. But anyway, so that isolated sounds like this. Yeah, and so you really hear the sound open up there. It basically starts cut off a lot, and then I just remove those restrictions as the sound goes on. So you hear that filter sliding out of the way, letting the lower frequencies back in. This cut in volume is so that you can see Anne from the show start to cast that spell with her hand. And so that whole effect just kind of subtly ducks this sound out of the way, so it's still there, but it lets some other sounds shine when they're more important. And we get into a few other sounds here. That's Anne using the spell. I took a stock electric, like Tesla coil sound, and then just pitched it up a little bit, messed with it to make it just different than what it originally was. And then we also get this guy. Just some white noise. Some white noise there to imply like the power that the thing's doing, and you can see the character's hair blowing in the show, so I wanted to give a bit of a sense of, oh, okay, there's some wind motion happening because this thing's so powerful, and one more layer to the actual portal itself that allows it to, like, sound a little different than when it's smaller, so it grows and it adds another layer to it. And that's a pretty cool synth. I think that might just be stock. Yeah, that's a stock Flex synth. And then the very last thing is when she does cast that spell with her hand, I added this to add a bit of a magic effect. And I think these notes are just like, yeah, it's an octave and a major third. So pretty simple, but a brighter sound. So sounds a bit happy, but still open enough that it's mysterious and otherworldly. So let's move on to day 10. Day 10 was home, and this one was also an interesting one, a lot like Mechanical. I just kind of went for it, made something, didn't know where I was going to end up, but I just started. And I made just cool, evil sounds using my bed back there. And so you can see here, no need to open up the project file on my end, what's going on. It is just those initial hits cut out of the recording, put under a lot of reverb, a lot of delay, some EQing to narrow out the frequencies a bit, and then a bunch of plugins, even more reverb, and then just a bit of compression and slight distortion on it. Day 11 was I redesigned the Pokemon move Blizzard from Gen 6, I think. And I don't really like how the original sounds. I'll probably pull that up or like play it now or something. But I wanted to make one that hit a little harder. So we have this guy. And so this one is made just with a lot of simple shapes. I'll go ahead and pull up the project file for it. Again, like I said, this one's very simple. It starts here with a reverse cymbal crash. And then it is just white noise that is put through a filter and then also reverb. And this little guy, who is just a sine wave, or actually, I'm sorry, it is a triangle wave with a square wave underneath it, that's just doing this little kind of arpeggio pattern. I started with a very consistent arpeggio pattern and then deleted notes at random and then pulled and stretched some things out so it sounded a bit more irregular. And it's not doing anything too special. It's just doing a kind of a bit of a cluster chord here. Is that a tetrachord? It is. It's doing an E tetrachord technically. So E, and then, you know, a second above that, a second above that, and then a minor second above that. And you get this. And then just some basic filter EQ, and it makes the shape that you need. Day 12, I wanted to do a big anime punch, and so I chose a scene from Hunter x Hunter, almost called it Monster Hunter, and this is what I got. And then it repeats 3 times. So it's very crunchy, and I kind of had to lean into that because the theme of the day was Fracture. If it was Impact or something, I could have done something a bit beefier, but that's what I ended up with. So I made that again with, or I haven't said yet, but it's been here on screen. So I bit baby carrots, I crushed a styrofoam cup and a soda can, and I punched my bed and my chair. And I can go ahead and pull up the project file for this. I remember I wrestled with this one quite a bit. It was pretty tricky to actually get it to do what I wanted it to do, and I didn't quite hit the anime-ness, like the over-the-top anime, add some magical sound effects type stuff. But I ended up with a punch that's still fairly solid, and so we get this, just kind of grabbing a bunch of these samples. And I added some reverb in the video editor, actually, to make it fit with the clip better. I think it actually hits a bit harder without the reverb. So that's pretty good. Very bone breaky, doesn't work super well for a face punch, but it's still a nice impact with a reversed kick drum, a snare drum, and then just a bunch of individual little cracks and snapples. Cracks and what's the word I'm looking for? It's not snapple. Cracks and crackles, I think. Jeez. That one's good. I think that's either the styrofoam cup or a baby carrot, but one of them, it's great. And then all together, it works. And the thing that helps it work is that they're all staggered. Nothing starts at the same time as something else. And so that allows it to just kind of carry over, be a bit of a wider, deeper sound. Day 13 was Time Freeze. For this one, it's pretty cool. I'll open up the project for it, but here's the sound itself. For this one, I sampled a thunder tube, which I show off in one of the later Noisevember prompts. I think that's this layer. We'll see if it ends up being this layer or not. Yeah, so that is just the sound of a thunder tube, an acoustic instrument, getting run through a phaser, maybe a flanger, I think, and then some compression, and yeah, it is a flanger, and then some reverb. And then also, it gets sucked up a little bit with like a filter beginning there and everything. And then also helping out with the sound, we have an 808, just from just a simple preset, and that's just descending in pitch, very straightforward. And we also get these sounds. So what's interesting about this sound and why I think it's cool is the start of it mirrors itself and then becomes the end. So this thunder tube sound, you can hear the extra crap going on there, is just this in reverse. Well, this is just that in reverse. And then the same thing with this little snap at the beginning is played in reverse at the end. And there you go. So that one's cool. Pretty cool little effect I did. Let's move on to 14 Empty. This one I can explain before I play it. All I did was I took a straw and then I just dropped droplets of water into a cup about this big where the water was like maybe halfway full or something. Added some reverb, some decay, some delay to that, and it created this. Cool stuff. Moving on, we get to day 15, recycle. And for this one, I show off the Thunder Tube, otherwise known as the spring drum. And this one I went totally acoustic, didn't have a ton of time, so I just wanted to do some good old, like, Foley, truly sound design. And so I'll just go ahead and play it. Yeah, I doubled up on the theme. The tube is made of recycled cardboard, and I put some recycled bottle caps and pop tops in there. Worked pretty well for the theme. Day 16, you get a button. Just a nice, squishy, springy sound that I made with these 4 objects that I had in my room here. I squeezed the microphone holder. What? Mic clip? I don't want to call it a clip because it's one of those like pressure ones. I don't know the name for it. I hit a tech deck on the table. I popped open an icebreaker container, and I popped closed an air freshener lid. So that one's pretty simple. Day 17 was Fizz. So I recorded some food, and I'll let it play itself. So for that one, I just quickly chucked up a visual of lava. I was going to go with Minecraft, but Minecraft lava, you're kind of used to it not making a sound. So I went with Ni no Kuni. I remembered that game just had a volcano level and just chucked that up there. And this one was pretty simple. I just took the sounds and pitched them way down. A tiny bit of distortion after that and some proper filtering made the right stuff, but made a pretty convincing lava sound. Then we get to day 18, Darkness, where I made a synth patch for a VST instrument, again in Citrus within FL Studio. And so this one I took more thematically than literally, and I just went for a very dark, low synth. And that one's pretty cool, and I saved it as a preset, so I have it for myself to use later in different projects. Day 19, Parallel. This one's pretty fun. So this guy is using all parallel intervals within terms of music theory. So it's basically just stacked parallel fourths along with parallel octaves, making a little musical item get motif. Day 20, we get into meditation. And so I did what I like to do for meditation, which is just kind of mess around with notes and pads and all that good stuff. So I'll play the original video. So this one was fun. It was a lot of fun just to play around with. Everything's just in E major, no, everything's diatonic in there, so just very simple stuff. It'll sound good no matter what I did. And of course I tossed the lick in at the end because I am a big dork. Day 21 is teeth. For this one, I tried to recreate a cartoon teeth chatter sound effect. So here we go. There wasn't too much actual editing for this one. It was just a lot of layering things properly and filtering them a little bit for cleanup. But it works pretty well. Not exactly what I was going for, but it ended up, being usable nonetheless. Day 22 is Black Hole, and this might be my favorite one of the whole month. I decided to recreate the red matter scene from Star Trek, the 2009 version. And so everything's built from scratch here, a bunch of synths and everything. Also, content warning for flashing lights, so please look away for the next 14 seconds. Yeah, this one was fun for sure. I'll open up the project for it so we can pull some things apart here. So this guy is a ton of different layers that I will try to pull apart here and make sense of. So we have this initial hit that then gets dropped out into nothing. So it just like slurps up. I wanted the sound of just things getting sucked in, which is what all the particles are doing here at the film. So this sound, I believe, was just me recording myself. And I think I just messed with it a bunch. So here, if I turn off these, we can hear what the original sounded like. Yeah, so that's me just pitched way down a whole bunch. We can unpitch it here. Yeah, so just... And then me trying to exhale weird, again, kind of from the back of my throat. And so that is both the intro suck thing and then also the hit that happens later. And then helping out that intro suck sound, we get just a fluttering filter sweep there. A reversed, what was this originally? A reversed clap. So you've got that clap, and then you also have just a little hi-hat hit, and those are both getting reversed. And at the same time, the filter swept up as well. And then you have this kind of cutout point in here, where there's a little sub bass getting sucked up, and then kind of this empty, vacant sound thing. Oh, that's the sub bass. Let me grab the vacant sound. And so that sound is just a clip from this massive snare hit that I have here at the end. But just the middle chunk of it and reversed. And I'm actually playing that sound throughout this whole part to keep building tension, so as the forward hit goes down, it crossfades into the reversed hit there. And then just the last few things we have are we have a sub bass that goes off when that other black hole part spawns. And then we have this sound. I don't remember what this is. That's a crunchier sub bass doing the same stuff. And then we also have this big ol' snare hit here. I'm sorry, this big impact. And that goes with this snare hit. And so this sound is a resampled sound that I used so that I wouldn't have to be like drowning my computer CPU here. This snare, yes, it was right here. It is run through copious amounts of reverb, 24 seconds of reverb there, and then that reverb is getting distorted through Isotope Trash 2, and then also like really compressed in a multi-band compressor. So that whole thing is just a big old mess, and I resampled it so that it could be a little more manageable as one single sample. The next day we get to is Fibonacci, and here's where the month starts getting strange. So this one, I'll leave all this text up here that you can read if you'd like. Basically, it's a beat. I decided I don't really think I know what to do for a sound effect, but I know what I can do for a beat for this part. So I used a bit of math here to make some ratios and cool stuff, and I ended up making this. So yeah, there's like 4 different layers of Fibonacci there. Those arpeggios are doing Fibonacci things. The bass pattern is going up Fibonacci notes depending on scale degrees. And the kick drum is even hitting a Fibonacci amount of times between snare. And so now we get to days 24 through 29. I took a bit of a break around American Thanksgiving. Other people didn't because there are a lot of British people on Air Wiggles. It's founded by 2 British guys. But anyway, so this picture here is the stuff I made everything down here with as I was catching up. And none of these have visuals, but they do all come with sound. So for day 24, the theme was grain, and I punched a bag of rice and edited it through a lot of pitching and distortion, and it ended up being more of like a stick hit sound. I don't know. However you interpret that, it's something being hit in some kind of game, hi-fi, whatever. Day 5 was tempting, so I took a piggy bank and I shook it around, and that was just where I started. I didn't know what I wanted to do with that, but I just decided I'm going to slow this down by nearly 1,000% and just see what kind of texture it makes, and it made a pretty cool thing. And so what I like about that is you don't get just the low frequency stuff of everything getting, stretched out really far and it all gets low. Because there was so much high frequency content in the original sound of the coins jingling together, you end up with some like nice mid-range shimmers in the really slowed down pitch down version, and I think those turn out very, very cool. And so if you're going to stretch out pads and stuff like that or textures out of these slowed down sounds, it helps to have some really high frequency content in there because it becomes very cool sounding. For day 26, the theme was secret. And so I took one of the mic cases for this mic and then combined it with my bedside cabinet over there, shown in this picture, to get this sound. I'll play it one more time. I added a little bit of reverb to make it a little more believable, but I imagined like you have a big, like giant oak or mahogany desk or something, and then you reach under, you flick a little switch, and a drawer pops out, was the idea. Ascending, this one is strange. I'll just play it. Let me open up FL Studio for this one. So I did this whole group in one project file, which may or may not have been a good idea, but it worked out in the end regardless. And I recorded an ascending slide whistle, that was the theme of the day, and then I just ran it through a ton of effects to get some wacky stuff. Oh, it's not playing for whatever. It is not playing for whatever reason. Let me get to the bottom of that. This guy. Oh, it's muted, that's right. So let me dive into what this sound is, because this is the ascending part. The rest of it's just a fun beat around everything. So this sound, if we take off all of the effects on it, is just a slowed down slide whistle. And it's not a high quality slide whistle, so you hear it cutting in and out. But that adds to the coolness of it when you add everybody back in. The last thing I'll add is gross beat and trash 2. So this is what it sounds like with just some basic reverb, distortion, and filtering on it. Still recognizable. Then you put it through trash, heavily distorted. And then we add this plugin called Gross Beat, which is basically just making the thing get a trance groove over it. And so it's nuts. This was the sound I got first, kind of without Gross Beat. And I was like, this sounds like dubstep. I want to make some EDM for this thing. And so I did that. It also has this stuff here. Gross Beat is doing some cool algorithmic stuff, and that's where the like pitch shifting and weirdness comes from also. But ended up being pretty cool. No idea why that happened, but it did, and I'm happy it did. For day 28, I did my second anime-themed thing, and it is Slice, and so I just took 2 big kitchen knives, swished them together, struck them together, and I got this. And so you can hear in there is a layer of white noise that's getting filtered up that's like really low. And then also there's actually an 8-bit like snare impact that is adding to the actual impact of the sound. And then the knife sound itself is just pitched down a little bit to make it sound more like a katana instead of a knife, because it was a little higher pitched than that, but pretty straightforward. And then for day 29 everything, I just made a shaker out of a can. I just made a shaker out of a little spice, what would you call it? Container? Glass container? Whatever. But I had to do a lot of cleanup on this thing. You can hear what the original sounds like. It was so quiet. And I recorded it like right next to my computer, which was running full blast, and so I had to do a bunch of cleanup on this and eventually got here. So it cleaned up really nicely, and that's probably the most interesting thing I can talk about with it, is like just the intense EQing I had to do to this guy, some weird compression to the high end, and then, you know, just some other stuff down here to make it sound good. I do not want to share my experience with you, thank you. Some gating, transient shaping, all that good stuff to help clean up a shaker sound. And then last but not least, we get to day 30, where I decided to do another weird beat. So this is day 30 Wiggle. I will play this and just let it go off and do its thing. And that's Wiggle, the fitting last theme for the Air Wiggles Noisevember sound design challenge. And so to explain a few things in that one, it's fairly straightforward. I went in knowing I wanted to sample a fluxatone for a beat. I knew I was I'm gonna record it, and then I'm gonna listen through to it and listen for parts that sound rhythmic. And I ended up getting that do that part, and I was like, okay, yep, I heard that in the raw recording, and I knew, all right, I'm gonna cut that out, figure out what tempo it is, and make it work. And then just around that, I built a basic 808 and with the drum pattern, and it all worked out pretty nicely. The only weird stuff that's happening there is there's a couple of the flexitone hits that got reversed, and then everything else is just straightforward, basic compression processing to clean everything up. Thank you for watching. I've been Cornboy, and this has been Noisevember. This has been quite a long video, much longer than I intended, but I wanted to go through everything in depth, so thank you so much for watching to the end here. Hopefully you saw something cool or learned something or felt inspired to make your own sounds. Airwiggles is a pretty cool platform full of a lot of cool people with, this event. It'll happen next year too, and there's plenty of other stuff they do along the way if you're looking for, job listings in sound design, if you're looking for meetups, talks with industry experts. It's a great place to go for that. I'm not paid or anything to say that. I just genuinely stumbled upon the platform and think it's a nice place. So anyway, I've been Cornboy. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.